Welcome back, and today we are going to be playing out both of the F-16s at the Top BR now, the 13.7 French F-16AM, as well as the 13.7 American F-16C. I thought about making two videos on the topic, but I'm going to be making the same video twice essentially, answering the same questions, so why not compile them into one and not spread out the top tier bullshit, which is still a bit of a clusterfuck. Now, it is a little bit more flyable. Of course, the stock grind has been nullified to a degree. You only have 2 Fox 3s, but it's better than having 0 in the current meta. But let's take a look at the difference between these two planes, because a lot of people have been asking me which one is the better vehicle. I'm gonna be right out of the gate. I'm gonna tell you that I think that the F-16C is the better plane, but it's not that cut and dry. There is a little bit of nuance to it and also a little bit of preference. As of the time of recording, the F-16C of course has HMD as well as more countermeasures, and the F-16AM actually doesn't have HMD for the radar, but it does have a better flight model. It's the F-16A flight model, and if you are familiar with it, this is one of the better flight models when it comes to dogfighting at top tier right now. The issue is that dogfighting doesn't really happen that much anymore, and the F-16C is still no slouch. Everything that is not a Mirage, a Gripen, an F-16A or an F-15A, you can still dogfight, and this Mirage right here comes in. We start missiling him. I know he's notching, but this will force him to stay perpendicular to us, and I can come in. He's not going super fast, but because of this missile, because of this position, I can force him in a very shitty spot. We are going to air brake just a little bit because I want to wrap this up quickly. This is not optimal. Of course, it's better to keep your speed and go into the raids, but I'm lazy like that. I want to wrap this up quickly, and it just looks a little bit more interesting. So we dodge his shot. We go vertical, he doesn't have the energy to pull up after us, and because of that, we are just gonna sit directly on top of him, and he is forced to basically fly directly through my gun. Now, it is a little bit sketchy, because if I miss that shot, I'm kinda boned, but we don't, because it's a flying Dorito that's going 12 kilometers an hour, which isn't exactly hard to hit. Now, the F-16AM is of course gonna have the better flight model, but most of your games are still going to look like this. Now, I'm going to employ a little bit of a hybrid playstyle. If you have seen my Gripen video, where I basically just full send it on the right side of the map and try to aggro as many people as I can, I still somewhat do that, but this plane isn't nearly as good in the sustained. It doesn't have the countermeasures for that. So I still go right, because a lot of people will try to go left on their side, and this will mean that you get a lot of head-on kills with your AIM-120s, which is just, well, the way you are going to get kills. And then after you kill the horde a little bit, you might get lucky and find yourself in a little bit of a dogfight. Now, we shot off 3 missiles, only 1 hit. The other 2 unfortunately got defeated. But we are just able to kind of circle on the right side of the map. And every time I see people flying at me, I can just re-engage and start slinging my missiles off. Now, you will see that I'm forced to stay head-on a little bit longer. I can use the Talbox ACM mode, but again, I'm just kind of lazy like that. So we shoot off 2 missiles. First one goes for the F-15. The second one starts following my radar when I break the gimbal. It just kind of fucks off the Narnia. It happens sometimes. It's really annoying. Luckily, in this case, it didn't really matter, because the Su-27 was going to die before we hit him anyway to a friendly missile. But you can tell that I'm just kind of rotating on one side of the map, and every time I get engaged, I just kind of locked him up. I shoot the missile off, and I start notching. Now, we notched this one perfectly. He tries going cold, but he's just a little bit too close, and he's not actually going to be able to outrun that one. And he goes right back to the hangar. That's an F-16C, so clearly the F-16AM is the better plane. Because if I have to listen to the comment section, Reddit and the forums, if you kill the other plane, that means your plane is better. That is just the law of nature, and unfortunately there is nothing you can do about it. In this clip, we are gonna be chased by a J8F, and we are gonna use the terrain here a little bit so that we can close in to him a little bit easier. And I know that I have the advantage in a dogfight, so right now I'm just trying to stay at around Mach 0.9, and I'm gonna just turn at high speed. I'm gonna not be at my optimal rate speed here, but I'm just trying to be faster than him, and he will try to pull the shot in because it looks like he's about to actually get the shot. He will pull a lot of AOA, bleed even more speed, and he's almost instantly energy trapped. Now, I need to be a little bit careful here, because of course the nose authority of the J8F is absolutely obscene. So I just need to make sure that I react appropriately to what he is doing, and I just try to go somewhat horizontal. I'm not trying to stay directly above him, because that's a very dangerous place to be. But at this point, he is kind of out of energy. We are going to go up a little bit. Just make sure that he doesn't get the stall shot on us. I noticed that he's trying to position the nose, but he's really just floating right now. And we are still somewhat maneuverable, so we cut the throttle, we pitch in, he's about to flip on over. And I was thinking that he was gonna flop down and then fly into my guns, but he's just gonna kind of turn into a frisbee. And he manages to somewhat reverse me. Now instead of trying to go energy again, I'm actually going to go for the zero throttle. And I'm gonna be using my F-16 shenanigans to just kind of out energy him. Now of course this is not exactly a fair fight. The J8F is definitely outclassed. But you know, I just want to show you a dogfight. That's really all I can tell you. Because well, top tier right now, it's all kind of the same thing. So I'm trying to show you the things that are a little bit more interesting, instead of just uploading the 20th BVR gameplay. Now there's of course nothing wrong with that, and it did grow me a little bit. But I only enjoy it in small bursts, and I do have to play the planes that are actually somewhat capable. Flying non-Fox 3 vehicles, it's an absolute pain in the ass. And at the end of this video I will actually show you a full game of me flying with AIM-9Ls only, just to show you that you can do it in case you are flying stock and you only have 2 Fox 3s. Now, I was doing this when there were no stock Fox 3s at all, so I was trying to make a video about stock grinding. And I thought, why not include it in the F-16 video? Because, well, again, as I said, it's a little bit different. And I just want to add a little bit of variation to these videos. Because, well, and very quickly, I have to rip on this plane a little bit. The Benelux tech tree. It's a little bit of a letdown. We had like 2 Dutch planes. The rest is Belgium. And it's like, you call it Benelux, but it's like, where's the Dutch planes? Like, can we at least get 1 Dutch F-16? And I'm not nationalistic whatsoever, but I do feel kind of shafted, and I would have liked at least a Dutch skin for the one of the F-16s, because it's of course one of our main Air Force vehicles that we use. So I decided to make my own. I just slapped 2 roundels on the wingtips and then put my flag on the tail, and that's really it, because I'm not gonna fly a Belgian plane at the top of the French tech tree. Now you of course also have the argument that the French didn't really need another F-16, and I think that like the F-16 in the German lineup would have been much more fitting, and then we wouldn't need a plane like the FRF Ice. France now has 2 Fox 3 slingers. It has the Mika Slinger Mirage and the AIM-120 Slinger F-16AM. And then of course for Germany we have the FRF Ice, or the ICE, whatever you want to call it. And I just think that it's kind of unfair, but I also understand that back in the day I think they said that they didn't want to add minor nations to the main nations like Germany, so it makes sense to a certain degree. But the Luftwaffe is basically integrated with the Dutch Air Force at this point, so I am not entirely sure why we went this route. And also like the argument, France has the Mirage, which is pretty good, and Germany has the FRF Ice, which is terrible and basically has nothing until we get planes like the Eurofighter Typhoon, which I think it's a little bit early for, but you know, it doesn't matter what we think, because Gaijin is going to do their own thing. Now let's take a look at his engagement here. Now I did cover this in my Fox 3 video, my missile guide. So we go for the FRF, he goes in, but he starts notching us, so I'm not going to fire it. Instead I'm going to go for the F-15, and I notice that the F-15 is flying away from us. But by the way he has been playing, it looks like he wants to come back in, and the second he starts turning in, the second he's past that point of no return, I shoot the missile off. I'm already notching him, and he's not able to get out of the missile. We notch his missile, he dies, and we don't. And then the FRF Ice actually ends up eating the ground. So overall, absolutely perfect decision making. I rated 10 out of 10 IGN. Now let's take a look at me only with AIM-9Ls. We are going to be hugging the deck. It is of course night spotting, both of which are very much beneficial. And the first Fox 3 gets sent our way. So we go into a notch, we dodge the missile, even if barely, and we pitch back into the F-16. Now we go up over the nose, or under the nose, and we try to instantly get behind him. Now at this point, I was actually not aware that I was running AIM-9Ls instead of AIM-9Ms. And that missile just went nowhere, because I shot it just outside of that gimbal limit. And the missile really doesn't like that. Now, he probably would have flared it anyway, and he ends up eating shit regardless, so it doesn't really matter. But you know, an extra kill would have been nice. So what do? We try to not stay in the middle of the fight, and we are going to try to stay around the outskirts, pick up stragglers, sneak up behind people, and make sure that we are in a position where we can really ambush them. Because in head-ons we are essentially useless, especially with an AIM-9L. From the side, you can get lucky if you're running AIM-9Ms, but you know, you are at a massive disadvantage and you want to basically break people off from the main game and get like the small fights, the 1v1s, because you do have the flight performance to dunk on people the second they get past the head-on. So planes like this aren't nearly as bad as something like an Su-27 or MiG-29 SMT, because they don't really have a flight performance. They are built around the missiles. With the AM, you can of course peep up over the mountain, and we see this F-15 chasing the MiG-29, so it's very unlikely that he's actually looking at us. He is afterburning still, so even though he's flaring, it doesn't really do anything, and we shoot him straight out of the air. We dive back into the terrain, because I don't want to get shot at from long range and put at a massive disadvantage in the position. I instead just use the terrain to get behind them as quickly as possible, and perhaps shoot a missile at them. We pitch on over. F-15 doesn't actually engage us, he's not really paying attention to us. He's paying attention to that massive missile coming from the heavens, and he tries to notch him, but the F-15 had a different idea. Missile comes in from the right, so we kind of just dive into the terrain. The missile overleads and, well, not really overleads, but it leads into the mountain, and he leads his plane directly back to the hangar. And we are still on only 1 kill. And this is unfortunately what most of your games are going to look like. You are just going to fly at distance. You're going to hope for people to park in front of you, and God forbid it turns into like a 1v3, because there's just very little you can do unless they all dogfight you at once, and they are all just in much worse vehicles. We again hug the terrain. That's really what you have to do when you are in these situations, and of course I have my radar turned off, so they don't get an RWR warning from me whatsoever, which makes it a lot more likely for me to actually sneak up on them. And more likely that they don't actually see me. So again, we are going to hug the terrain. We are going to pop up from the trees and the terrain here. And we are side aspect. But he actually sees us. Which, I mean, good on his end. And he's being absolutely swamped right now. But he's also just keeping his afterburner on. So I shoot the first missile off. A little bit of a wasted missile. But it does actually end up pulling in. But because the F-15 actually keeps turning, it doesn't have the energy. And it kind of just files out of the air. But then, you know, he starts flying straight again, and he's not really gaining any position. He's not really trying to do anything. He's trying to keep his speed while simultaneously flaring. And doing 3 things at the same time just really doesn't work. He turns into a mech cannon. Look at that massive explosion. That is a little bit of a rail gun. And yes, they are using mech rounds in atmosphere, George. Thank you for asking. But yeah, that's about it. The planes are pretty similar, of course. One has the better kit, one has the better flight model. I think it's a bit of preference. I think I do prefer the F-16AM, just for when the occasional dogfight happens, or when you have someone riding your 6, and knowing that the guy on your 6 like is defeatable if you just play it right, no matter how good the enemy is a nice feeling to have. I don't like planes where when I see someone on my 6, say I'm flying a MiG-29 SMT and I see a gripping on my ass, where I know that I just have to run forever. I don't think that's very dynamic and that's very fun, but I do think that the F-16C overall in the average gameplay loop is better. Just the ability to have a HMD and more countermeasures is just nice to have. Now this doesn't make or break the vehicle, especially the HMD doesn't, but it's just nice to have. I like the accessibility of it, and I do think that overall in most of your games it will serve you just a little bit better. For the last guy, we are on the deck. We are going to pitch up after him with the AIM-9L. And of course, because he isn't paying attention to us, we get the freest kill of the universe. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you all for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and you will see me in the next one.